What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the KindaFunny Xcast, your home for all things Xbox here at KindaFunny. Of course, I'm one of your hosts, Snowbike Mike, and joining me today is just one of my gaming dads. But you know what? When I lose one gaming dad, I replace them with an incredible guest. And Gary Whitta, you're on the bench for just 1 second because I got a dope guest that I can't wait to talk about here on the podcast. It's my good friend, Jez Corden from Windows Central Gaming, and of course, one of my favorite Xbox podcasts on planet Earth, the Xbox 2 podcast with his co-host, Randall Thor, the man with the million. Jez, what's going on? How are you today?
Hey, man, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good, Jez. I mean, when I see your smiling face all the way from across the different side of the globe, I'm really happy. You know that. It's going to be a great time together, and we have a lot to talk about, especially because the intro of the show is going to be all about you. But before we do that, let me introduce my other guy, my gaming dad, Gary Whitta. We've been playing games all week together. And of course, some call you the Rogue One, but I call you Mr. Incredible, Mr. 5 in a row, Mr. Infallible, Gary Whitta.
I did officially ask Greg on KindaFunny Games Daily this week to change my nickname from the Rogue One to the Infallible. Because I'm very, you know me, I don't really care about achievements or trophies. You know, if they pop while I'm playing, that's fine. Every now and again, if there's one that's not that out of my way to get, I'll go get it. But I'm not a trophy hunter. I'm not an achievement hunter by any stretch of the imagination. But that Infallible achievement, I think mainly because I just always thought it was so far beyond me, it was impossible to win 5 shows in a row. When I finally got it, I've been obnoxious and crowing about it all week long. For sure. I earned it, goddammit. I get to brag about it.
You deserve to do that, Gary. 5 in a row in Fall Guys is tough. And I know a lot of people have been tweeting at you and I saying, hey, this might be the playlist. Our good friend Maka, who does a lot of achievement guides, he said, hey, these might be some of the easier playlists to do it. But you know what? You and I, we went out there and got it done.
We both got it separately, right? Within a 24-hour period of one another.
Yep.
You got it in like the squad celebration, right? And I got it in fall ball.
Pretty sweet stuff. I like a little fall ball football for you. Pretty good, Gary.
Yeah,
I like that.
It's always been my favorite game. Whenever they do that all fall ball playlist, people really complain about it, but I love it. I like fall ball. I'm one of the few people that really likes it.
Let's switch on gears and introduce our guest to our awesome, incredible community of KindaFunny best friends. Of course, if you're in the Xbox world, you know Jez very, very well because he is all over the place from his work at Windows Central Gaming. And of course, as I mentioned, the Xbox 2 podcast, one of my favorite podcasts to go listen to. So please go check it out. But Jez, how would you describe yourself to the best friend community? Where would they see your work? What would they know you from? What do you do?
I'm the guy who leaks the Xbox Series S specs, code name, price, and the Xbox Series X specs, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what put me on the map, I think. But I'm plugging away for years, you know. I just love the Xbox ecosystem and the wider Microsoft ecosystem. Have them for years, and I made it my job because I wanted to.
Very impressive. Yeah. And you know what, Jez? To piggyback off of that, making it your job, since you're the guy that made this all possible, you made that job a reality. I actually have a question coming in from the KindaFunny best friend community. I think it's geared towards you and Gary Whitta, who made that dream a reality, joining the video game industry. So Jordan writes in and he wants to ask you both a question. He says, hey, this is my first time I've ever posted this question. I'm a 26-year-old fan in the UK with only college qualifications, not ingrained in games, but I'm locked into what is happening through KindaFunny and other outlets. I'm in a small city with no presence in the industry, so I have no direct access to any industry members. How do I get into the video game industry? And Jez, I mean, you've made this dream a reality. What are some of the tips that you would give the next generation of video games media, video games personalities and influencers, or maybe video game developers and designers? What would you give them tips and tricks for?
Man, I mean, that's a very broad question. We could do a whole podcast about it. But honestly, it's Twitter. It's all Twitter, man.
Okay.
Honestly, like I pretty much built my entire career on Twitter. You know, just sort of getting involved in the community, talking to people about things, you know, every conversation, getting involved. And it just sort of emerged all naturally. Like I wouldn't, in my wildest dreams, I never aspired to be a writer. I've got even less qualifications than you, Jordan. You know, I dropped out of high school and senior school, as we call it here, and I didn't get any qualifications whatsoever, and I just started talking on Twitter, getting involved, talking to people about games, and God knows what happened. I mean, obviously I've been very lucky, but if you keep plugging away at it and you're consistent and you sort of brand yourself around the subject matter that you're really interested in or you're really into, or pick a niche and stuff like that and go really deep on it, you know, you'll find other people that are as passionate as you, and you know, you work together to build a brand around that. Like Rand, for example, on the Xbox 2 podcast, we were literally just talking on Skype about this kind of stuff, you know, Xbox and gaming, and we were just like, we should make this a podcast. You know, we talked for like 2 hours just to each other, and we just basically put our Skype calls out there. And now we've got like, you know, Rand's got 80,000 subscribers from the podcast and his own videos and stuff, and you know, it's just being consistent and really going for it and putting yourself out there is what I would say. But
Yes,
it's a very
really
deep topic, you know, and it's always evolving and changing.
Gary Whitta, you were around way before Twitter became the thing that could get you into the industry. How did you become such the big guy that you are in the PC world when you were doing PC Gamer?
Well, on the one hand, so far as like dispensing advice is concerned, any advice that I might give based on my own experience of getting into the game industry is kind of useless these days, because, you know, when I broke in the late 1980s and the industry, you know, bore no resemblance to how it is today, right? How I did it back then would not work today, nor would you want to try and do it the way that I did it. There was a handful of kind of print gaming magazines that existed, that everybody read in the UK, like Computer and Video Games and Zap 64 and Commodore User and Crash, and these magazines were out there. And if you wanted to work in games journalism and review video games and be a part of that whole world, you needed to get a job at one of those magazines. There were like a handful of gatekeepers. And so I just kind of kept knocking on the door until somebody let me in. The good news is it's so much easier now because you don't need to go through any gatekeepers. You can kind of just go straight to an audience. You can create a podcast. You can create a YouTube channel. You can create you can get out there and publicize it on Twitter. And not everyone has a following to start with. I understand that, but I am a firm believer that if you create something good and work really hard to put it out there, people will find it. And, you know, we now live in an age where most of the people, I would say, who are considered influential voices or people who, you know, are out there and are making a name for themselves in video games are not necessarily people who work at, you know, established outlets. They're people that created their own platform. They created their own YouTube channel. They created their own Twitch stream. They created their own podcast. And so again, as long as you can create something good, it's still on you to create something good, right? And try and create something that isn't the same as what everyone else is doing. Like, how do you make your voice distinctive? How do you make the content that you create worth consuming? Like, those things haven't gotten any easier. You still have to create something of worth, of value. But the good news is, once you've created something, again, back in the 80s, I could write game reviews, but I'm like, well, now what? Like, who's going to publish these? I have I have to go find someone that's willing to publish them. Now, I could publish them myself. I can put it on YouTube. I can put it on Twitch. I can put it on social media, and then I can put it on a podcast. There's so many different ways to bypass all the gatekeepers of old and just get your work straight in front of an audience.
Guys, we have a lot to talk about this afternoon, so let's jump into it. But first, Jez, I have 3 quick rapid fire questions for you before we get into the fun news of the day. Of course, what are you playing, Jez? What's in the Xbox right now?
Man, I've been sort of bouncing between The Outer Worlds and Pillars of Eternity, which I realize is really strange because they're both quite old games. But I've completed Outer Worlds before, but I never did the DLC. So I thought I'm gonna go ahead of Avowed, which is, you know, Xbox exclusive Avowed, which Obsidian's making. A lot of people think it's going to come out in maybe the end of 2023, maybe 2024. Ahead of that, I really wanted to experience what Obsidian had made recently. So I've been going through Peril of Gorgon DLC for Outer Worlds, which is excellent, by the way. And then the next DLC I'm coming up to is Murder on Iranidos or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but it's sort of like a murder mystery DLC. So I'm basically going through the Outer Worlds again. I'm playing like an extreme sort of kill everyone playthrough. Because I'm just sort of rushing through it. So I'm not making any hard decisions. I've just got a Gatling gun. I'm just mowing down everyone, you know, to get to the DLC that I want to do. which is probably going to have dire consequences for me later in the game. But similarly, I don't know why, but because I was playing the Outer Worlds, and when I finished Perils of Gorgon, I was like, you know what? I'm also going to play Pillars of Eternity because Avowed is set in the Pillars of Eternity universe, and it's an excellent game. But it's one game that I've just never finished because it's very long, and I fell into a game breaking bug, and I had to start again. And I was like, I can't be bothered to do this right now. But it's been a couple of years, and I'm going to give it another go now. I'm determined this time I will finish Pillars of Eternity, by hook or by crook somehow. So yeah, that's what I'm playing right now, really, which I realize is very much not the trending games. But
I mean, you have a really good one with Outer Worlds.
Obsidian.
Everybody loves Outer Worlds, so that's a good one. What is something that you really like that Xbox is doing right now? I mean, you really love sides. What do you like?
Yeah, I love first of all, I love what they're doing to highlight disabilities. They're running Disability Pride Month right now, which I've never seen a company do before. But I just love how much Microsoft's investing in that space because, I got family members who benefit from this technology. I personally don't because I'm very lucky. But, one of the things Microsoft always says is that eventually, as we age, as our generation ages, we might benefit from this technology. When we're old, when we're elderly, I have no intention to stop playing games when I'm 80, 90, if I live that long. Probably won't. But, just in case I do, the technology that improves accessibility will improve everybody's lives. And, I just love what they're doing in that space, leading that whole sector. And I really want to shout that out. But also, I really love what they're doing in cloud. I really like cloud gaming. And, I think that's going to unlock huge potential for developers, massive new audiences across TV and mobile, because the more barriers you eliminate to accessing the industry, the more people you'll get in. We're seeing free-to-play games proliferate now. That's eliminating the barrier of having to actually buy a game. And now Microsoft's eliminating the barrier of actually having to own a console. And I think that's excellent as well. It's going to unlock a lot of potential for devs and also like unique game mechanics that leverage the cloud and that kind of thing. Did you ask me for 3 things, or am I going crazy?
You're going wild. No, I like it. I said, give me what you're happy about with Xbox. So if you got a third one, give it to us.
All right. I don't know why, but in my head I thought you said 3 things. But
I thought you did as well.
I don't think I said that.
I think you asked him for 3 things.
You know what the comments say?
You have to come up with a third thing to ask Jez.
Yeah, I was like, God damn, 3 things. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe you did. Someone do the replay. But a third thing, I don't know. I really love what Microsoft's doing to invest in Xbox gamers too. Like invest in getting a new IP, because one of the things Microsoft's always lacked as an entity is, I think, to some degree, nostalgia. I think Sony and Nintendo have this sort of massive pool of nostalgia they can pull into when they're looking to explore IPs. But Microsoft basically only has like Age of Empires, which, you could say is pretty niche, and Halo as well, which they're not handling maybe the best right now. Controversial opinion. But, some people would say that Halo's not being handled the best right now. But they're trying, I think the pandemic was very hard on Halo. But the fact they're investing in studios like, ZeniMax, and the game Bethesda, and your Elder Scrolls and your Doom, and, they're trying to acquire Activision Blizzard, and, Activision Blizzard and these publicly traded companies, they have a completely different set of key performance indicators. So, like, whereas Activision Blizzard might be like, we're going to cut corners and do as little as, we're going to spend as little as possible to make as much money as possible. Microsoft has a completely different key performance indicator, which is like, we want as many damn users as possible. And as a World of Warcraft fan, I think the best chance for World of Warcraft to get back to its sort of, where it used to be on the sort of, the sort of, I don't know, the main stage of the gaming industry. I think Microsoft is the best hope for that game, because I think, people who know me and know my content, they know I've got like part of my brain. There's like a cluster of neurons in my brain that is just addicted to that game forever. Even though I'm not playing it right now, I still check the news about it every day. I'm just addicted to that game. So the Warcraft fan in me, selfishly, is excited for what Microsoft will do with some of these properties. But it's not just
I think there's a really good point there.
And all the rest.
I think there's a really good point there, particularly about Activision Blizzard. And don't forget, it's Activision Blizzard King, right? Don't forget there's that aspect to it as well, right? All the Candy Crush and everything else. And I think there's a really interesting question coming up if and when that purchase goes through. what does Microsoft, what does Xbox do, for example, as the new owner, as they will eventually become, of, say, something like Diablo Immortal, which is making money hand over fist, but doing it in a way that a lot of people find very predatory and unsavory. Like, is that something that Microsoft want? Is that something that Xbox, who I think, are really trying hard and I think somewhat successfully trying to position themselves as like good guy Xbox, we don't do evil things. Like, what do they do when they inherit something like Diablo Immortal, which has a very negative reputation right now?
It's a very interesting topic, and Microsoft does have a loot box policy up on their website where it's pretty vague, to be honest, and they talk about like how the loot boxes must provide value to the game and the gamer or something like that. I don't have the information up top of my head, but if you Google search or Bing search, get your Microsoft points, you get you can Bing search or Google search or whatever. You can search for it and you can find like Microsoft's loot box policy, and they talk about like providing value for the gamer and also providing the odds and stuff like that. And Microsoft's always like, since the big 90s antitrust case against Microsoft really likes to get ahead of potential government regulation. And I think loot box is one area that Microsoft predicts will eventually lead to some form of government regulation around gambling mechanics and stuff like that. Because it does poke at those, those pathological sort of addictive personality things. There's a pathology there that I think
it absolutely does. And I think there's an even broader conversation, not just about things like microtransactions. That's one aspect of the direction that I think increasingly a company like Activision Blizzard's going in. But like you could say, overall, like Activision Blizzard's like core values, I don't think are necessarily Microsoft's core values, but they are going to have to. When Xbox brings them in and like they sign that deal, those values are going to have to come into line with what Xbox values are. And what does that mean for, again, something like Diablo Immortal or Warzone or any of the weird monetization stuff or any of the practices that people kind of find a bit icky about the way Activision and Blizzard go about their business these days? There's going to have to be some major changes, I think.
Yeah. I think a lot of Blizzard fans are optimistic for the effect Microsoft could have on that business. Because as you say, Microsoft does try to be the good guy and stuff. And whether that's for business reasons or because they genuinely want to be that way, ultimately, as long as the end outcome is that better environment for the devs, better environment for the staff, and ultimately a better experience for the customers and gamers, as long as the end game is that, I think it's a good thing to support. But it's an interesting discussion. Again, we could go on really deep on it, and we could have a whole podcast, I think, but. It's an interesting topic.
Looking at those Overwatch loot boxes, and all I want is just one skin, but I got to continue to buy those loot boxes just to get the one skin that one character I like.
That's how they get you.
But
did you not hear they've removed loot boxes from Overwatch 2?
That will be the next move right there. That's great because I just bought a bunch in Overwatch 1, so I'm glad that we're moving away from that because I really wanted one skin for the character that I play. Of course, you can't just do that like every other game. So glad to hear that. That's awesome, Jez. That's big stuff, and that's kind of the conversation you and Gary were, slowly getting into, and it could be a whole nother podcast. But we got a lot more to talk about, especially with you, Jez, because you talked about cloud and mobile, and you have been somebody who has really spearheaded a big conversation about an Xbox handheld, always getting people excited for what could be the future. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I got to remind you, hey, this is the Kinda Funny Xcast. We post each and every Saturday at 6 a.m. West Coast, Best Coast time on youtube.com/KindaFunnyGames, roosterteeth.com, and of course on podcast services around the globe. But don't forget, we are now Epic Games partners, which means if you are buying games off the Epic Games Store, or if you're buying V-Bucks for Fortnite or upgrading your look over in Fall Guys or Rocket League, please use our Epic creator code KindaFunny at checkout to help support the team in a brand new way. And talking about support, we always want to give some thank yous to the people who support us over on patreon.com/KindaFunnyGames at the Patreon producer tier. So for the month of July, thank you to Fargo Brady, Delaney Twinning, James Hastings, Casey Andrew, Gordon McGuire, and Al Tribesman, all for your support over there as Patreon producers. This week, the Kinda Funny Xcast is sponsored by Chime and Shopify, but I'll tell you all about that in just a little bit. Guys, let's talk about the news. And you know what? We have a really special one that's kind of near and dear to my heart and Kinda Funny's heart, because we have a big special announcement that just went live today. Hey, Xbox fans and Kinda Funny best friends, Are you excited for As Dusk Falls? Are you in the LA area and want to come celebrate a little pre-launch party with myself, Team Xbox, and the Kinda Funny crew? Well, on Friday, July 15th, Xbox and Kinda Funny will be taking over the Fonda Theater in Los Angeles and turning it into the perfect venue to experience this interactive drama. Greg Miller, along with co-hosts Snowbike Mike and Joey Noel, will bring the Kinda Funny flair to the show with a live We Have Cool Friends, a Kinda Funny Gamescast, and of course, gameplay. Event registration links will be available on Monday, July 11th. So Gary and Jez, of course, a really exciting one. You guys both know, for me, my first ever special hosting event with Xbox. It's kind of a dream come true, you guys. So I wanted to share that with you both because that's what it's all about, these big milestones that we get to share with our friends. So thank you, Jez. Really, really special. But let's jump into it, guys. We have some sad news to go along with our celebration. This week, it has been reported from Windows Central Gaming by Sam Tolbert, Jez, one of your teammates over there. It's time to say goodbye to Xbox 360 games with gold. So it reads like this. Xbox Games with Gold is getting a fairly big change in the coming months, as Xbox 360 games will no longer be included in the monthly free games. Microsoft shared on Tuesday via emails to Xbox Live Gold subscribers that starting in October 2022, Xbox 360 games will no longer be included in Games with Gold. The reason behind this change is that Microsoft has reached the limit of what games can be added to the service for players. Xbox Games with Gold began in July 2013, bringing 2 free Xbox 360 games for Xbox Live Gold subscribers to redeem and play at no extra cost. Jez, I'll go to you first, of course, coming from your team over at Windows Central Gaming. How do you feel about no more Xbox 360 games? Is this a sad day for you or what?
I mean, it's kind of like, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm amazed they still do games with gold at all. You know, I mean, it's the offering from Games with Gold has been, pretty subpar, shall we say, for like the last several million years. It's gone downhill. Let's not beat around the bush. It's gone downhill. Games with Gold has gone downhill, and I think part of that is obviously Game Pass. They want to push people to Game Pass. They want to sort of their budget for sort of, because they have to pay developers for their content, right? In these sort of programs, it's not just like we're just going to whack random game in here. There's some sort of royalty deal involved, or an upfront cost. And I think their mentality is like, Games with Gold doesn't help us grow as a platform, but Game Pass does. So all that money that we would have been investing in Games with Gold is going to be invested in Xbox Game Pass. And like, it does suck for people who are invested in that sort of aspect of Games with Gold, and Xbox Live Gold in general. But I've been on the record, on Xbox 2 podcasts and other places, that I believe what we're seeing here is just another step on the road towards getting rid of Xbox Live Gold completely. It feels like a complete dinosaur of a past era. And I think like the future of Xbox is getting rid of Xbox Live Gold completely, either moving the multiplayer paywall over to Game Pass or getting rid of it completely. Gives them some strong differentiation. And obviously, Xbox Live Gold makes a lot of money, so it's not something they'll just do overnight. But me and Rand, we've always speculated and expected that there will be a point theoretically where Xbox Game Pass subscriptions hit a certain level where Microsoft's just like, okay, now's the time. We can get rid of Xbox Live Gold or merge it into the base tier of Xbox Game Pass and sort of give ourselves some really strong differentiation and sort of consolidate those subscription services, because at this point, Xbox Live Gold just feels like a vestigial limb. And it's I think this is just what we're seeing here is just another step on that road towards it being consolidated or removed completely. That's my belief.
Yeah, I feel that, Jez. And we've had that conversation here on the Xcast before of when is that moment? When is the moment for change? And this feels like another step towards that moment of change, right? Will it just go free to play for all online and we kind of move past Xbox Live Gold? How do you merge it together? I guess right now when I look at it is, what is the alternative? Will they give us 4 Xbox One games to maybe have that conversation? Will it just stick with 2? Because when I added it up, right, I think Sam did a great job. This started in July 2013. If we just do the 360 and OG Xbox games, That's like 216 games that you could have redeemed in these 9 years, 400 plus in the 9 years if you redeemed everything, which is like a wild thing to think about. That's like a whole game collection that you could never need anything for. And so I do wonder what is going to be the move here. When is that tipping point, as you brought up? When do you kind of stop that subscription service and move past that? Or is there a way to still bring value to this? Because I think as we move with the free to play way of like, hey, if a game is free to play, you don't need Xbox Live Gold. You can just play it, as we've seen now with Fortnite and beyond. When do you say we don't need to do this anymore? Gary, do you think we'll see that in this next year?
Well, much of the stuff that Jez was just talking about, I said very much the same stuff earlier this week on Widow Wednesday on a Tuesday, because that was the day that the news dropped about the 360 titles going away. So I agree with all of the points that he just made. First of all, it is sad that the Xbox 360 games are going away, because I think we can all agree that 360 was and arguably still is, because the current generation is still early, the greatest Xbox generation, arguably one of the greatest console generations ever. Like there was so much great stuff. And it was, the some of the hardware breakdowns aside, it was when it worked, it was a really great console, and they brought in so many great achievements, and the Xbox Live Arcade, and so many great things came in with the 360. It really is, like, historically, I think, a very important hardware generation, and it did great things for the Xbox platform, which they then totally squandered with the Xbox One. But it was a great generation while it was there. So sad to see that going away. But on the larger issue of games with gold, yeah, absolutely, it's very clear that Game Pass has now superseded it, as the kind of the main value proposition that Xbox is putting in front of us. It's funny, Mike, you and I were looking at the list, like the historical list of games with gold games that have been offered since the very beginning. And back in the day, when games with gold was all there were actually some great games that were offered. But now that the focus has shifted to Game Pass, games with gold now kind of feels like the scraps that are left over. You know what I mean? Like it's I can't remember when was the last time that they had a games with a gold game that was like, oh my god, I gotta get that. And the other issue is, I just don't think, it is interesting. I feel like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop in terms of them just discontinuing it entirely, because they seem to have discontinued it as something that they're interested in promoting to any great degree. Like, if you go, unless you've customized your Xbox One, Xbox Series S or X dashboard, like, you've actually got to hunt a little bit on the dashboard to even find where the games with gold offers are. Like, they're buried like way deep down in the dashboard in terms of like where Microsoft has put them by default. They could put them right up front under like the first thing you see when you go to the dashboard. They don't. They're buried way deep down. This week on Xbox, a video that I strangely enjoy watching every week. Maybe it's something about Major Nelson's dulcet tones that they just kind of ease me into the weekend in a very kind of chill way. But I really like that little digest of like everything that's happening on Xbox. Here are the new Game Pass releases. Here are the major new releases. Here are the big events, and that stuff is like front and center. And then and usually, like, in the very end of the video, it's like, oh, and here's the games with gold. And they just kind of like throw them out there like they don't really care. So it's clearly something that has like been pushed way down the order of priorities for Xbox in terms of what they're interested in promoting. And I do wonder if there is that is part of them kind of slowly kind of easing this out of existence, and one day we'll wake up and turn on our Twitter feeds and the news will be there. Microsoft discontinues games with gold. I kind of feel like we're on that path.
Jez, what do you think will happen in October? As we look at that, right, we kind of know the history of games with gold, Xbox Live Gold, and that subscription when they tried to raise the price just last year, right? And they heard the outcry and the feedback, and they switched that and reverted it back to that kind of cheaper option. And we heard on the podcast as well, when we first talked about that, we heard there was a number of community members that still do like that cheaper option of just, Xbox Live Gold. When we look at October, do you anticipate a big move, a substantial situation where it will change? Or do you think we just stay the course and maybe just go down to the 2 Xbox One and beyond games as the offering?
It's hard to say, if when it comes to substantially changing the model of Xbox Live Gold and stuff like that, it's difficult because we know like fragments of information about how many subscribers there presently are, and stuff like that. And we don't have granular information on how many subscribers are paying for the lower fee and how many people subscribe on a monthly basis, which is more expensive. But you can sort of extrapolate a basic sort of estimate about how much money they get from Game Pass, not Game Pass, Xbox Live Gold. See, it's just they need to consolidate it just so I can talk about it more effectively on a podcast. You know,
and that's the other thing.
You know,
It's confusing to have these different
Yeah.
offers. Like, remember, they fixed it now, but remember when it used to be like PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now, and they were two like different, and they did kind of a lot of the same things, but some things that you can only get with Plus, some things you can only get with Now, and it's like, well, what's the difference? What do I need to get both? Like, what do I get with each? And you really had to kind of like study up to understand what you were getting with each one. I don't think the current situation's as bad as that, but there's these two different offers where you basically get like a bunch of free games, every month, and the library is always being refreshed and renewed. And as long as they've got these two different things, I think they are kind of fighting for your attention a little bit, and creating a little bit of brand confusion.
Yeah, but it all comes down to cash flow ultimately, because subscription services they give your operation a guaranteed amount of cash flow every month. You can like basically predict we're gonna have this much profit this month or next month and whatever. That's a lot of that represents a lot of value to Microsoft, because they can make like year-long projections about how much money they've got coming into Xbox, and they can make plans based on that. So it's like it's hard for them to just rip that band-aid off. I'm being American for you guys. Band-aid. We call them plasters in the UK. We call them, you guys call them band-aids, right?
Yeah, he calls them plasters. Are you calling them that, Gary?
Well, they have the Band-Aid brand there, but you don't call them Band-Aids. Yeah, you call them plasters.
Yeah, call them plasters.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's insane, John.
Yeah. They can't rip the plaster off,
that's what we used to say. You got to rip the plaster off, yeah.
Yeah, rip the plaster off. Because there's broad implications for the cash flow, and there's people who it's like a habit. It's like a decades-long habit of having Xbox Live Gold for a lot of people, and the sort of easing that out. It's not something you can do overnight. So I think it's something like Gary said. It's going to be gradual over time, and this is just another brick knocked out the wall. And eventually, like I really genuinely believe, like in my heart, that Xbox Live Gold is going to go away in the next maybe 2-3 years. When Xbox Live Game Pass, that's not even a thing. When Xbox Game Pass hits a certain level, I bet Microsoft already has a plan in place where they're like, once Game Pass hits this many recurring subscribers, then we do Operation 66 on Xbox Live Gold. That's Order 66. Sorry.
I like that, Jez, and I think everybody has that feeling. It will be really interesting to see in October what the messaging is and what will be the benefits or the extras that they might bring into this, right? We see with Game Pass, right? Xbox Game Pass Ultimate members get that nice Game Pass perks, right? And you get a number of things, whether it be the free season of your favorite anime, might be a month of Discord Nitro, it could be an in-game loot, right? We see a lot of that. Be interesting maybe if they fold some of that into Games with Gold or Xbox Gold. I do look forward to seeing on October, but it was funny to go down a trip down memory lane as we looked at some of the games that were offered throughout Games with Gold, because it's been around for 9 years. And guys, found a great website, finder.com.au/games with gold list. A team over there put together all of the games that have ever been given away throughout that subscription service. And it's wild to go through some of the games that were back in the day, right? In the first 2 months, you got Assassin's Creed 2, Crackdown the original, Dead Rising 2, Halo 3, and the list just goes on and on to SSX. I know, Gary, you love snowboarding out there. Army of Two, The Devil's Cartel. Shout out to Army of Two. Servers are shutting down pretty soon on one of those Army of Two games, which I read. But it is wild to see some of these games and think, man, what a collection of games that they've given away. And as you brought up, Jez, right, some of them have been lackluster in the last couple of months, right? Maybe even a year plus since Game Pass has really taken a hold of everything. But when you look back at it, they've given away a number of games that would really make for a great collection there. Jez and Gary, that's what I want to get into right after our quick word from our sponsors is some of your favorite Xbox 360 games. But I'm going to have to keep you guys holding if you're watching and listening and you're not on Patreon. You can think of some of your favorite 360 games during a word from our sponsors.
I love that sound. It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business. So, upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility, and I know the Kinda Funny store at kindafunny.com/store uses Shopify to sell all our merch, including all those cool Portillo shirts you guys have been so great about supporting with. I love how Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business to succeed from down the street to around the globe. Reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps. Go to shopify.com/kfgames, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/kfgames right now. Shopify.com/kfgames. No one likes waiting on a paycheck, especially when you've got bills due. Good thing there's Chime. Now you can get your paycheck up to 2 days early with direct deposit. That's up to 2 more days to save, pay bills, and generally just feel good about your money situation. But Chime is more than just about getting paid early. It's also an award-winning mobile app, checking account, debit card, and optional savings account. So what are you waiting for? Hopefully not your paycheck. Get started with Chime today. Applying for a free account takes less than 2 minutes. Get started at chime.com/kfgames. That's chime.com/kfgames. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. Early access to direct deposit funds depends on your payer.
All right, guys. When we're back, Jez, I want to ask you the question, what are some of your favorite 360 games from that era? When we take a look at these Xbox Live games with gold from the 360, what are some that pop out to you that are your favorite from that era?
Man, there's just so many. It's like Gary said earlier, that it was just such a magical gen with just so many great games, so many memories and stuff. Like, there's just so damn many. Like, BioShock comes to mind instantly. Your Mass Effects, like. It's funny because a lot of these games have like been ported or upgraded, and in my head, I don't even think of them as 360 era games because it's like they've had enhanced editions or remakes or remasters and stuff. But like, I was like, oh my god! Like when I saw you scrolling through that list just now, like when you put that up, and I was like, Metro Last Light was on the 360. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah,
but yeah, the Metro games also incredible. There's just so damn many, just so many.
Okay, Witter, you're one of my gaming dads. You always bring it old school with me. And the 360 was really my console, right? That's the one that me and mom stood outside of a Circuit City for on the launch day. And that was the one I put all my time and love into. So a lot of 360 games I'm going to bring up. But what are some of yours that you remember back then?
I remember standing in line to get mine at launch as well. And I'm looking at this Metacritic list. And the first thing it's pointing out to me is I very rarely agree with Metacritic ratings. They always seem like a little bit out of whack to me. And I'm looking at this list, and all the bangers are up there. I just wouldn't have them in this order. In answer to your question, because this is something that's come up many times over the years, what are the best Xbox 360 games or your personal favorites? And I almost immediately say the same two every single time: Mass Effect 2 and the original Red Dead Redemption. Which are two of not just the best games of that generation, but they're two of my all-time favorite games ever. They're so good. And I just happened to play them on the Xbox 360. That's the other thing that's interesting about looking at this list. And I don't know what this says. There's a couple of different conclusions you could draw from this, but you have to go all the way down to if you're just looking at the top 10, according to again, this is purely according to Metacritic's critic scores. But if you have to go all the way down to number 10 of the list of the best Xbox 360 games to find an Xbox 360 exclusive title, which is Gears of War. 1 through 9 are all multi-format titles. Now, does that mean that Xbox 360 was a great generation, but not necessarily the greatest in terms of platform exclusives? Or does it just mean that platform exclusives aren't super important anymore? I don't know, but I mean, I'm going to read them out real quick. This is according to Metacritic. 1, Grand Theft Auto 4. 2, Grand Theft Auto 5. 3, BioShock. 4, The Orange Box. 5, Mass Effect 2. That's criminally low. 6, Skyrim. 7, Red Dead Redemption, also ridiculously low. 8, Portal 2, also very low. 9, Arkham City, and then 10, finally, Gears of War. So, what conclusions do you draw from that?
I'm impressed with that lineup. I think Grand Theft Auto 4 at that time on the 360 was that big, wow, awe-inspiring game, right? It got a 98 on the Metacritic score that I'm looking at the same list on yours. But when I think of Grand Theft Auto 4, that was the game that changed everything, right? We went from that look of San Andreas and 3 and Vice City to what Nico and the team were doing with the new graphics, the kind of more realistic look from what that big graphical jump was. And I was always impressed with 4. I thought 4 had a ton of fun. I think what they added on to the GTA formula is what we see to this day with 5 and GTA Online, right? It kind of started with 4. And I like where 4 is at. I think Jez will talk about BioShock in a moment, right? But Skyrim, game of a generation, Gary Whitta writes. Portal 2, a game that I love near and dear to my heart. So I actually kind of like this.
I mean, look, there's nothing on that list that you would point to and go, how the hell is that on there? You know, like they're all absolute brilliant games. I think there's a bit of an argument to be made about the Orange Box, as we were chatting about before the show. Orange Box, absolutely one of the greatest games of all time on PC. The console versions were kind of a mess because Valve never bothered to support Team Fortress 2 on PlayStation or Xbox, so 1/3 of the Orange Box was basically kind of redundant. You couldn't really have a lot of fun with Team Fortress 2 on the consoles. But aside from that, I mean, they're all really great games. Just to speak very quick, because you brought up Grand Theft Auto 4, and it is number 1 on the list. It pips Grand Theft Auto 5 out by a couple of points. We were talking about this last week as well. It's interesting, isn't it? Grand Theft Auto 4, I personally think it's a great game. I love the whole Nico Bellic story. I thought it was really, really interesting what they did. And yet, when I was talking to Greg and a couple of people about this earlier, it feels like that game hasn't aged terribly well in terms of like the fondness for it. I'm still terribly fond of it, but like, if you ask people about Grand Theft Auto 4, they'll kind of say, not my favorite. Maybe it just got overshadowed by the fact that Grand Theft Auto 5 was like the next quantum leap beyond that. And that's now considered like the all-time kind of apex of GTA. But I wonder if Grand Theft Auto 4 suffered a little bit. And then the older games have nostalgia value because they are much older, and they're like maybe Grand Theft Auto 3 or San Andreas or Vice City was the first one you played. So you have that kind of nostalgic affection for it. But I wonder if like Grand Theft Auto 4 has almost become like the awkward middle child, you know, where it's like people, it's still great, but like the affection and the fondness for it has aged less well, which I think is unfair because I think it's still a terrific game.
Remember they added online to that too, and it was a ton of fun. That was the first
they?
time we've ever had the true GTA Online experience.
I don't remember
death matches and cops and crooks. That was a really good time. And so yeah, I like 4 a lot. I will always remember 4, especially on that 360 era. I think that was a special time. Jez, when we look at this Metacritic top 10 of 360 games, do you have any outliers here that you think that's crazy that they're up on this?
Well, hang on, let me just pull it up here real quick. But I thought it was interesting what Gary was saying about the fact that a lot of them just aren't Xbox exclusives. They're all multi-platform, and it kind of comes back to the argument about Xbox not being able to execute great exclusives or whatever. But I don't know. I've never really associated Xbox with particularly great first-party, mind-blowing experiences. It's always been on the third party for me. And I think
historically Sony's always had the edge there when it comes to like who's got the best first party titles. I even as an Xbox fan, I would concede that.
Yeah, I feel the same way, but at the same time, it's like the third party experiences have always what seems to draw me to gaming anyway. Like my favorite console game of all time is without a doubt Monster Hunter World, which didn't launch that long ago, but I put like 1,000 hours into that game.
Oh shit!
Which I can't say that about any other console game. I got 10,000 hours in World of Warcraft, so that's a different story altogether. Yeah, it's extreme, but
no, but I think it generally
is way too highly rated.
Again, totally conceding that I think Sony don't have the better first party games historically overall. Like if we play tennis, like name a brilliant like first party Xbox or you do the Xbox ones, I'll do the PlayStation games. You as the Xbox person are going to run out before I do. Like I'm going to get to keep going with like great first party. So that is a reality, and it is something that I think Microsoft is working on. Again, picking up Activision and Blizzard and Bethesda and everything under the ZeniMax banner. You could argue that they've now, going forward, they've actually kind of leveled the playing field like in a couple of like major acquisitions. But historically, Sony's had the edge there. But I'll make the same point that I've always made, which is that when people typically ask about should I get a PlayStation or an Xbox, historically, I don't think there's been much between them. Each generation of hardware has been much like the other, right? In terms of like, there wasn't a ton of difference between what a game looked like on 360 or PlayStation 3 or on Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and now on Series X versus PlayStation 5. Like, you really have to be like a digital foundry, magnifying glass, pixel counter sometimes to see much difference in terms of the technical performance. And then in terms of the actual games that are on offer, 90%, 95%, arguably more, are whatever game that you're getting, and BioShock, Arkham, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty. It's not going to matter. You're going to get them on both whatever platform you have, that game's going to be available. So it really comes down to like personal preference on like which controller do you prefer, or a couple of other weird little things like that. Again, I personally prefer the Xbox 360 controller. That's one of the reasons why I like to play over there. But and then like a handful, literally a handful of first party exclusive. If you really love Uncharted and God of War, you're going to want of course you're going to want a PlayStation. If you really love Gears of War and Halo, of course you're going to want an Xbox. But I feel like the first party exclusives, in terms of like the experience you're going to have as a gamer, is increasingly, it's always been a very small sliver of the overall experience.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, I'm a big Gears of War fan, but it's not the reason why I buy a console. The reason why I buy Xbox is because all my friends have got Xbox, And like, while they have started defeating the sort of the crossplay wall, as it were, it's still up. Most games still don't have crossplay, and to have that sort of assurance that you'll be able to play with your friends, you all tend to gravitate towards the same console. But
I think we are getting towards that tipping point, though, don't you think? Now, like the crossplay, I feel like we're finally crossing that tipping point now. Like you said, I think you might, like right now today, you might still very well be right to say that most multiplayer games don't have crossplay. But like every day, there's like it's becoming less and less tenable to say, oh, our new multiplayer game doesn't have crossplay. Like we used to just accept that, but it's fast becoming like unacceptable to not have a crossplay solution for your multiplayer game.
I mean, we found out during the big Epic court case that Sony charges some kind of lost revenue fee or something. I can't remember how they described it, but they charge a fee to developers who want to enable crossplay because their perception is that if there's crossplay, that reduces the incentive for someone's friend to buy a PlayStation. So they charge developers some kind of fee to enable that, and I think for a lot of developers that is like prohibitive. It doesn't make business sense for them to pay that fee. So a lot of them, maybe they just think they won't do it. But every now and then there's like an indie game that comes out that's like, oh, we've got crossplay. And I think like, are they paying the fee? Does the fee
look at
exist?
Among Us. Among Us was a tiny little game, like like 4 or 5 developers, and that had crossplay out of the gate. It can be done.
Yeah. It can be done, yeah.
You talk about those first party, Jez, right? And we only see Gears of War in this first top 10 off of Metacritic. But when you get into 11 through 20, right, we get to see some shine. Elder Scrolls Oblivion, then it goes into Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4, Halo 3, Modern Warfare 2, Pac-Man, BioShock Infinite, Braid, Street Fighter 4, Fallout 3, and then at 20 is Gears of War 2. So you do get to see some of that first-party experience shine, like you brought up with Gears out there. Halo 3, the conclusion, right, of that Bungie saga for Chief was really, really special. That was a great time. And so Oblivion. I mean, Jez, I know everyone on the Xbox circuit has talked about Starfield, but Oblivion, for me, one of my favorite Bethesda games of all time. I absolutely love that game. I can go back to it any day of the week.
The first time I played Oblivion, I literally didn't understand it. I was like, hang on a sec. I can do anything? I was just like, I can pick up this apple? Yeah, it was mind-blowing. I'd never played anything like it before. And I wasn't like, gaming was always like a sort of, something that I experienced, but I wasn't super invested in it until I got older as a sort of like, I'm really passionate about this. It was just something, everyone had a console and everyone played games here and there, and so like I never bought magazines, I never read news, and I didn't keep up to date with any other stuff. I'd only hear about games through friends or what was trending and stuff like that. And I can't even remember how I managed to acquire Oblivion. Like, when did Oblivion come out? So Oblivion came out in 2006. So I was like 18 when it came out, I think, something like that. I don't even remember how I ended up with it, but I was just like, I just can't believe how like my decisions affected what would happen in the quest. Like, I never played a game. I know these games existed now, like CRPGs, which I got into way after their time. They're seeing a resurgence now, but I hadn't, because I never gamed on PC at that point, really, beyond MMOs. I didn't realize like these kind of experiences could exist. And that's like, come back to what I said earlier, like a lot of these games that You know, we criticize Microsoft's first party today, but a lot of these games will be first party now. Like Elder Scrolls 6, is that going to be exclusive? Probably. Call of Duty, Microsoft is committed to putting that on other platforms, but it will be first party. And you know, what the hell is this list, man? Why is Pac-Man Championship Edition higher rated than Fallout 3?
To be fair, that is a good game. I don't know why it's so high on the list.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to point. The next one for us to talk about is Xbox Live Arcade. You see Pac-Man Championship Edition DX at 15 on this list, and then Braid down at 17. Yeah, are you going to defend Pac-Man on this list at number 15 right now?
No, I mean, no, I was going to say, I love Pac-Man Championship. I still play it. Like, if you want to just like play a cool video game for 5 minutes, that game will deliver every time. I'm not sure if it should be quite so high on the list, but it's a great game. I still really, really enjoy it. But I'm really, really glad you brought up Braid, because I was going to do it anyway. I want to talk about it. So I think it should be much higher on the list. It eventually did go multi-platform, but easy to forget that at the time that it launched, and for pretty much I think for the whole 360 generation, it was a 360 exclusive title, right? It was an Xbox Live Arcade exclusive. I think you can get it on every platform now, but again, we're talking of that generation. And I think maybe because it was an arcade title or an indie title, we're not really kind of giving it all the credit it deserves. But I will die on a hill arguing that Braid is one of the greatest video games ever made. Like that game, the first time I ever played it, the whole time bending mechanic and the way that it towards the end you realize that the storytelling, the narrative of the game, and that time manipulation mechanic are actually kind of intertwined. It's literally a work of genius. It's so clever, and it's such a work of art, and it's so beautiful. And the art does that kind of watercolor, almost kind of like oil painting style of graphics, and the music, and every puzzle it's like Portal, where like every puzzle brings you right to the brink of like, fuck this game. You're about to throw the controller, and then the light bulb goes off and you get it. And you go, oh, that's so brilliant. Why didn't I see that at the beginning? And then you go to the next level. It's such a beautiful game. I think it's one of the few perfect games in existence. I would put it much higher on the list. And I'm glad that we're talking about it now, because I'm gonna change my default answer. Where people say, what are your favorite Xbox 360 games of all time? I'm gonna say Mass Effect 2, Red Dead Redemption, and I'm gonna add Braid as well. They might actually be my top 3.
Okay. Jez, any Xbox Live Arcade games that stick out to you that you'll always love and remember?
Man, I had a blast with Castle Crashers, man, back in the day.
Oh, yeah, 4 players.
Behemoth,
yeah, 4 players. Like, as a kid, like, games like Gunstar Heroes on Mega Drive, Sega Genesis, as Americans call it. You know, like, how's my American accent? Did you like that?
I love it whenever you do it.
But, you know, Gunstar Heroes and, you know, Streets of Rage and Golden Axe and stuff like that. Like, me and my brother always used to play that as kids. And Castle Crashers, like, it was like a return of that genre of game after what felt like years of hiatus. And it was like, oh, wow, I remember this kind of game. And it was so funny, you know, the sort of Newgrounds style flash animation that is quite prevalent on YouTube these days again. It was just a great party game, you know. I played the hell out of that. But and there was one amazing game that to this day I am irritated that we never got more out of it. And I don't know if it's time or night because it's 1 a.m. here, but I can remember the dev. It was Chair Games, Epic Games, Shadow Complex, that's right. Shadow Complex. Did you ever play that on Xbox Live Arcade?
Yeah, I remember.
It was like a Metroid. Yeah, it's like 3D, well, 2.5D sci-fi Metroidvania with, you know, it was amazing. I was like, again, it's another one of those games like, man, I haven't played a Metroidvania in so long. And then Shadow Complex comes along and it's like, oh yeah, Metroidvanias are still cool and they still work in the current year. You know, so I had a lot of really great experiences on Xbox Live Arcade. It was a really great platform, and like Idea Xbox, I guess, is carrying the torch of that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we got to talk with Chris Charla a couple episodes back about Xbox Live Arcade and Idea Xbox, and that was a really fun time to go down memory lane with him and Paris. For me, when we talk about Xbox Live Arcade, I always have to bring up Gotham City Imposters. I had so much fun with that, right? That was an absolute blast and a cool little spin on the Batman universe, right? And I think right now we get to see a little bit of our favorite franchises taking a spin in different genres that we don't really see them in. Like you and I, We liked Gears Tactics. I know that, Jez. You and I have talked about Gears Tactics, and I know your love for that game. And I thought that was fun in the Gears universe. And then, of course, Halo Wars and Halo Wars 2, I'll always love. And I think that they should continue to take that Halo franchise and go into different genres with it. Another one for me that I tweeted out actually today was Small Arms. Small Arms on the Xbox Live Arcade was my Super Smash Bros. During that Xbox 360 era, right? Like, I think we see it now with Brawlhalla, and you get some other games like the Nickelodeon Smash game. But like, Small Arms back in the day was my Smash Bros. When I didn't have the Nintendo console. And I'll always love Small Arms for that. Just a little 4 players on a 3D platform just beating each other up. I thought it was a blast. I really, really loved that game back in the day.
So I cheated a little bit, but I'm glad I did. But because I just went and Googled like best Xbox Live Arcade games and pulled up a random list to see if there's any that we were sleeping on. And man, there's a bunch. And it's really made, as I'm looking at this, it's really making me think,
I was eventually going to yell at you guys if you didn't bring up Super Meat Boy, because that was
don't worry, I got you.
Because
it's on, because of course it's on this list, and it makes me think, man, Xbox Live Arcade had some real. I guess again, Game Pass has kind of become it now, but like, man, there was some bangers. It was a golden age. So okay, Trials Evolution, the Trials games, my God, they were on Xbox Live Arcade. I know you like those Trials games, Mike.
Love those games. Yep.
Super Meat Boy is here again. Too hard for me, but obviously it's got its fans. Bastion. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Castle Crashers is here, obviously. Pac-Man, Braid obviously is here. Fez, Limbo. One of the greatest games of all time. And then this is a weird one because I worked on it and I didn't even remember this. The Walking Dead. Season 1 was an Xbox Live Arcade.
He worked on it and forgot about it.
I worked on it and I forgot about it.
It's kind of what Jez was saying earlier, just like you don't think of it as like that generation game. Like I think of all Telltale games as like PS4, Xbox One on, right? It's so weird.
Big shout out to Doritos Crash Course and Doritos Crash Course 2. Those were awesome games, and those should come back because they are an absolute blast to play. And yeah, you can go down the list. You see Spelunky in here. Spelunky 2, that's currently out right now, is absolutely incredible. It'll make you want to throw your controller against the wall, but it's a really, really special game right now that I absolutely love. But yeah, there's some great games. And, you know, we go over to the Metacritic list and we just list off the top 20 there for you. But of course, those are going to have the big third parties in there, like we saw with Grand Theft Auto and Onward. But it is nice to take a look back at that era as we start to sunset this new Games with Gold and Xbox 360 games. And we also know that Jason Ronald and the team with Back Compat has now hit their limit as well. And will we see that, you know, introduce more games, maybe with the Activision Blizzard and Onward? But right now, you kind of have this interesting situation where if you have your 360, you can play some of those classic titles. Onward, you might not be playing some of the games that you really grew up with and loved from back in the day.
This is going to sound a bit crazy, and I don't think this would ever... It feels like it could never happen, but I'd love it if it did. You know how you get like the Super NES Mini, like the little classic mini box that they bring out with like 50 games preloaded in the PlayStation? How cool would it be if there was like an Xbox 360 Mini or an Xbox 360 Classic that had like a bunch of these games we're talking about preloaded on them, like the 10 best like Xbox Live Arcade games just loaded on, some like Braid and Fez and Trials, Castle Crashers, Pac-Man. That would like $99 HDMI, plug it into your TV. That would be incredible.
Jez, are you buying that? I mean, we have Back Compat titles already. We probably have all the good ones, but like, are you buying that, Jez? Would you buy that?
Man, I'm trying to be efficient and effective and reduce how much plastic stuff I've got in my life. So I'm looking at my desk right now and I'm thinking, where would I put a 360 Mini?
I feel like if they, I mean,
sizes are small, man.
I don't think it would ever happen, but I feel like if they would probably do the OG Xbox first, right? But even so,
yeah, maybe. I
feel like I wonder why they've never expressed an interest in that, because Nintendo's done it, Sony's done it, Sega's done it, Xbox for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe they just feel like it's not necessary or whatever. But like, Xbox is now old enough, right? 20 years old, or more than 20 years now. The 20 years, I think, is like you can have nostalgia. Once things more than 20 years old, you can legitimately talk about nostalgia because those are the games you grew up with as a kid. Yeah, I would love to see like a little Xbox 360 Mini. Or an
that.
Xbox, an OG Xbox Mini.
I think it comes back to what we were talking about, like how much nostalgia, I don't know what you call it, a nostalgia pool Microsoft has to tap into, because a lot of those games are third party, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the games Nintendo can put on its system are directly associated with Nintendo.
Well,
So,
but I mean, but I
think
don't know
that's
about that.
probably
If
an
you look at
aspect
the
of it.
NES Classic, the Super NES Classic, and the PlayStation 1, which I know wasn't super successful, but they had there was a bunch of third-party games on all of those systems.
Mm.
So you could do it.
Well, everybody, I only have so much more time with these two incredible gentlemen on the podcast, but I do want to talk about a possible Xbox handheld since we're talking about dream things that we would have with Jez Corden, who has really spearheaded this lately over on the Twitter conversations. Jez, since we only have a little bit of time, let's just talk about it. The Xbox handheld, always a dream of mine. As a big Xbox fan, I've looked over at my Game Boy and beyond. I've looked at my PlayStation Vita, and I always wished that Xbox would make its own dedicated handheld. And you have really talked about it a lot on the Xbox 2 podcast and beyond into the Twitterscape. What is an Xbox handheld in your mind? What's the dream scenario that you would like to see Xbox and Microsoft create?
It's funny because, like, I keep talking about the Xbox handheld, and I just know there's people at Microsoft who are like, "Oh God, he's doing it again." But it's something that I've actually heard through sources and grapevines and stuff. I've actually heard that Microsoft has been exploring prototyping this kind of product. And that's not to say it's definitely coming out. They prototype things all the time. Across the whole company, they've got a lot of really amazing engineers and research people and development and stuff like that. And there's all sorts of products that they've prototyped over the years that never made it out the gate. And the Xbox handheld might just be another one of those sort of products. So me saying they've prototyped it doesn't necessarily mean they're ever going to make one.
Can I just? I'm sorry. Can I just say, when I brought this idea up several episodes ago out of thin air, I was just like, "Oh, here's an idea. What about like an Xbox handheld?" Right? Nintendo was obviously in the handheld market. Sony's been in the handheld market over the years with a couple of different products. Why? And when you look at what Xbox was able to create with the Series S, like everyone always marvels about like how much power is in a Series S for how small it is. Why not a handheld? Why can't they get into that market? You all laughed at me. I got shot down in flames. It's not like it's now been announced and I'm like, oh, I was right all along. But we're talking about it like it's a viable thing. When I bring it up, though, I'm the asshole. Like, what? Gary, what are you talking about Xbox handheld? Now suddenly it's viable.
We like Jez a lot. We like Jez
Yeah, exactly. When
That's
Jez
all.
brings it up, it's a great idea. When
Jez.
Gary
We like
brings it
Jez
up,
a lot.
it's ridiculous. I see how it is.
It's really interesting from a business perspective because there's if they did do a handheld, there's potentially a large amount of risk, right? And I think the most likely scenario, which I'm going to put out there right now, is that it will be a cloud-based handheld. It'll probably be a cheaper device to give it differentiation against the Steam Deck and Nintendo Switch, which, Nintendo's the Switch Lite isn't so expensive, but I think it'll be sort of Switch Lite-ish, maybe even cheaper, that focuses entirely on the cloud, because the problem I've got with xCloud, and I think like, a lot of people, when I tweet this out that Microsoft should make a handheld, the replies are always the same. Well, we've got phones. But I think a lot of these people who say this, I don't know if they use an xCloud very often, because half the games or more you play an xCloud on your phone, it's just not a good experience because most phones, are just not big enough. Like you try playing Pillars of Eternity on a phone, you can't read the text. It's tiny.
Yeah.
Designed for a TV. So I think like ultimately what you get, what the whole premise for me about making a xCloud handheld is that it has a bigger screen to sort of accommodate the UI scaling that these games are designed for.
Yeah,
but like
and also
a lot
it's
of
not
people
just...
then.
No, go ahead. Sorry, Jez, finish your point.
Well, I was just going to say, like, the next criticism that people say is, well, my internet's not good enough for cloud. Or they say, like, my country doesn't have cloud at all. They don't have the xCloud service, so I prefer native. But then if Microsoft did do a native handheld, it wouldn't be an Xbox Series S squashed into a Nintendo Switch. It's just, like, not feasible with today's technology. And then people say, well, put an Xbox One S in a Nintendo Switch size console. But, like, even then, if they did do that, they would be having to ask devs to target that hardware specifically. It'd have to be like a low watt device, and it'd have to have completely different architecture. And like, it's not necessarily an Xbox 360 game or an Xbox One S game wouldn't necessarily automatically just magically run on this device. It'd be another SKU for devs to target, which at that point you're going to devs and saying, invest in our handheld, which might fail, which again creates a cascading amount of risk. So I think the most likely scenario is that for Gen 1, it's a cloud handheld, which requires no extra input from developers to put out there. Microsoft can get like feedback and sort of experiment with design and stuff like that, as to what worked, what didn't work. And maybe in like 2 or 3 iterations, then they can look at doing an Xbox One S handheld or something like that. And they can say like it's got this amount of Xbox One games on it or something like that. Because obviously we do have the backwards compatible stuff that could feed into this. But I just think it just makes so much damn sense.
When you say it does, Jez, not when I say it.
No.
When I say it, it's ridiculous.
Doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel
no,
right.
No, but actually, seriously, this is actually a really interesting discussion. And I'm glad it's now being taken seriously that Jez brought it up. So to Jez's point, that he makes a really good point about how the phone isn't really the answer. To say like, oh, but I've got a phone, and yes, technically you can play Xbox games in the cloud on your phone, but the screen being too small is even if you've got like one of these giant Android phones or like an iPhone Pro Max or whatever, it's still not as big as the screen on a Steam Deck or a Nintendo Switch, where the size of the screen actually becomes viable for games with text and everything else. And Steam Deck even has problems with text. They have to point that out sometimes when you play a game on Steam Deck. But that's just one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is if you want to play the game properly, you're gonna either have to get a clip-on controller thing or Bluetooth a controller to it, and there's no elegant solution for that right now. And I think that massively, shrinks down the number of people that are willing to do that, right? You just want to be able to pick up something and play it, not clamp on a thing or Bluetooth a controller and then, well, where does the phone go when I'm holding the controller? It's all just too much hassle. You want a simple solution. And then Microsoft's other answer is touch controls. But if you've played a game with touch controls, it ain't great. Some games it works okay with, but again, it's not a catch-all solution. None of these things add up to a solution as elegant and pick up and play as an actual dedicated handheld, right? We still want, that's why people like the Steam Deck, while people like the Switch, we want a dedicated handheld. But to Jez's point, I think the idea of a cloud-based solution also makes a lot of sense. Because yes, if you're going to put all the hardware local in the console, we're not at the point yet where you could do like something the size of a Switch that's Series S powered and would be affordable. Again, you could probably do something like a Steam Deck, but then you're looking at $500-$600, which I don't think Xbox would want to come in at that price point. They want to make it affordable. So if you offload all of the rendering and all the hardware to the cloud, and all you have to put in the box is essentially, the screen and some Wi-Fi stuff and a couple of other bits and pieces, you can bring the price down. And it actually and developers don't have to worry about targeting different hardware. Like it would all just work. And increasingly, I think that the other reason why they wouldn't do a dedicated piece of hardware and would have it be more cloud focused is Microsoft keep telling us that they're less and less interested in selling you dedicated pieces of hardware. They're not as interested in selling you an Xbox Series. I mean, they'd love you to buy an S or an X, but they keep saying to you, the whole point of our new strategy is you don't need one. Play it on your Samsung TV, play it on your phone, play it on your laptop, play it, or play it all via the cloud, maybe play it via a dongle. But like the whole point is that you're not restricted to having like the dedicated, compute hardware, connected to your TV anymore. So that to me, like the idea of having a dedicated console that does it all skews away from the approach that they're moving towards increasingly. But a cloud-based piece of hardware it would complement what they're currently already doing, which is more ways to play that don't require you buying a dedicated box with all the hardware inside of it. And so I think it's, again, they're still somewhat restricted by, you're going to have to play when there's a great connection. And I still think we're maybe a year or two away from getting to a point where you can really comfortably, again, I've tried it. Like the cloud gaming, it's not always great. Even when you have a great internet connection, it's not always brilliant. That's going to get better as the infrastructure gets better. So maybe in a year or two, when it reaches some kind of tipping point where it feels truly viable. But I really like Jez's point of like, it could happen, but if it's going to happen, it's more likely to be a cloud-based solution than trying to somehow cram like an Xbox Series S or even a One S into, a Switch-size handheld.
Yeah, I like both.
I know we're live. Can I be right back just 2 minutes?
Yeah, of course, Jez. Go for it.
I hear someone yelling.
Perfect.
I'll be right back.
Don't do that.
Just one.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of both of you, actually. That's the stuff that, I've always dreamt of a Xbox handheld. I've always wanted one. And I totally get what you and Jez are saying, right? For me, I want a bigger screen, 100%, right? Even the Nintendo Switch screen is not big enough for me. I want that to be bigger, right? I am in the camp of give me a Nintendo Switch XL, make it bigger, make it better. And then on top of that, you bring it up so well. I actually need dedicated controllers on this, right? I need some sort of side controllers on it because the touchscreen, as you brought up, right? The touch controls, I think Xbox has done a really good job with having to remap the touch controls, set it up how you like. But now my fingers are on the screen and I can't see this half of the screen because my fingers are on top of it.
Yeah,
so
and plus you just want that
controllers.
tactile. You want to feel like you're pressing a button, right?
Mhm.
That sometimes just tapping on a screen, you can get a false positive or like, did that go through? Like you don't always know what you're doing. It's not. I think it's great that they're doing that effort and they keep adding more games to touch controls all the time. And there's a whole team dedicated to doing it because again, they're obsessed with broadening the accessibility and touch controls. Even if it moves the needle a little bit, it's still moving it. And so, and again, there are some games that work really well with it, but I wouldn't want to play like again the idea of playing something like Hades with touch controls. Like give me a proper controller, give me buttons. I need that. And again, to my earlier point, like yes, it's great. I've got all these things. I've got like a the what do you call it? The Razer. Is it the Kiri? I can't remember the name of it. Like the thing that clips on.
Yep.
The Kishi that clips onto the side. I've got one of those little brackets that will basically clip onto an existing Xbox controller, right, and hold the phone above it. So you've and the controller's connected via Bluetooth. Those are all cool. Those are all cool gimmicks and cool gadgets. But like, you can't expect people on a mass basis to like do that, like clip on their thing every time they want to play a cloud game. I think offering people something that is like just pick it up and play. It's like just the same way you would a Switch or a Vita or a Steam Deck. It's all there. I actually, the more I think about it, especially with the cloud angle that Jez was just talking about, I feel like it's increasingly like it makes sense to me. Like why not give it a try? Especially the fact that the cloud aspect would really allow you to keep the price of. I mean, you could maybe do this thing for like 99. Well, not with the screen, but like I don't know, like certainly the price of like a Switch Lite, $199.
Yeah, with you two talking it out and being here with you guys on the podcast, that is the right answer, right? I am on the team of saying I would like to be able to download these games onto this dedicated handheld, right? And because I don't have the best internet, or if I'm on a plane, the plane internet's never strong enough, right? But like when you break it down like that, when you talk about price and what the hardware has to be, the cloud is the solution. And it looks like that team is doing that. And so when we look about the cloud offerings, and we'll end the show with this, of course, Gary's a big component or a big advocate for the dongle, Jez Corden. And now, we look at the Samsung TVs, but it's only on 2022. What do you think about the dongle? Because I know you and your team have written about the dongle before. What do you envision this? Do you think it's truly in our future anytime soon?
It's not a dongle.
Oh, okay.
It's more like a hot plate.
Or like
I was told
it's okay.
It might look different by the time it comes out, but I've heard that it's like shaving the top inch off a Series X. And they don't think about it like a Chromecast. They think about it more like it's like a streaming console. And the reason for that is one of the problems with a lot of the xCloud solutions right now is the bandwidth required for video encoding. And that's why, like on a phone, for example, where they can't be sure about what hardware the phone has got, they do a lot of the video encoding server side. However, and I urge you all to try this, if you try xCloud on a Windows PC, you should have a much, much better experience. It should feel a lot more close to native. And the reason for that is they offload a lot of the video compute to the video encoding. They offload that to your PC, which improves the quality of the stream. So if they do the streaming console, it will actually have some local hardware that is designed around video encoding, and it should provide a faster experience and a much better experience. And I've heard that Microsoft employees are, they're testing some of these things now. And like when you said earlier that your experience on a plane is not that great, I've heard the experience with some of these new techniques they're using on a plane, using this new technique, it just feels a lot better. And, because obviously Microsoft engineers, they're testing these extreme scenarios, like on a plane with terrible plane Wi-Fi, and they're testing it in all these different ways. And, they want to get it to that level, where it feels like an almost native experience. And I think ultimately that's what they're gunning for with this streaming console.
So we've talked about the dongle a lot. And yeah, the dongle is just like the name that we always kind of go back to, because we've seen a lot of the, like, you know, like the Fire Stick and the Chromecast, things that just kind of like stick directly into the back of like the, you know, it's sticking to your HDMI, and you don't even see it because it's like behind the TV, right? That's what a Chromecast is. That's what a Fire Stick is. But no, I think you're probably right that it's going to be something more like an Apple TV, like just a very, very small box that still sits on your your TV cabinet or whatever, but it's just way smaller. The kid, whether you call it a dongle or like, again, the idea of just like a very, very thin Series S, all of those different form factors I think are interesting, what that might be. But the point is it does feel like there is a spot for like a really cheap, like maybe as cheap as $49, $79, $99 cloud only box that plugs into your TV. I mean, like Jez, how confident, how much money, like if you were a betting man, how much would you bet on that being something that Microsoft ultimately does really come out with, like a $79, $99 cloud only Xbox?
I bet $1,000.
Yeah.
Maybe that's,
I think, and look, the Samsung thing, I think, I actually thought it'd be the other way around. I always thought it'd be the dongle first, then baked into the TVs. It's happened the other way around, right? The Samsung TVs are there. I imagine the next thing is you'll see those rolling out to LG, you know, other, maybe not Sony, but like, you know, other TVs. I've got an LG TV. I hope they bring it, you know, to mine.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Like, there's basically two tiers of xCloud. There's one that uses local compute, and there's one that doesn't. So, like the new Samsung TVs, and you know, I was asking around why it's only on a subset of the new Samsung TVs. The reason for that is Samsung has allocated hardware specifically to do the video encoding. So, if they were to backport it, and I heard they are going to backport it, it's going to be like a 720p stream, probably on TVs that don't have the hardware to do the video encoding, because they'll do that server side, which does affect latency, you know, from what I understand. And like I say, you can test this yourself by trying xCloud on the Xbox app on Windows 10 or Windows 11, because those do, like, if you've got a powerful PC, it will leverage your local compute to do some of that video encoding, as I understand it. So, you know, a dedicated box would do is for TVs that don't have that local compute, or they can't guarantee that local compute, the box would do that for you. So you could use it with your existing TV. Hell, you could plug it into a CRT TV if you wanted to, and like get really old school with your xCloud and play it 4:3 aspect ratio. I don't know, but that's the mentality behind it. You know, they're testing all different kinds of form factors, different kinds of methods of delivery, and all this kind of stuff. And also with xCloud on phones, which is a bit, comes back to the handheld discussion, I have to go through Google's policies. You know, that's why a lot of the games that are on xCloud via Google Play, they have their in-game monetization stripped out, because Google Store policies are like, hang on, you can't sell microtransactions through this game. You have to do that through our store or whatever. So what a dedicated handheld would do, and what a dedicated streaming box would do, streaming console or dongle, whatever, that would allow Microsoft to bypass Google's store policy. Mm-hmm. And as we know with Apple, they're not even allowed on Apple, you know, because Apple's like, no, we don't want competition for our store. You could get rid of that.
The more we talk about it, the more I'm convinced. I would probably do more than $1,000. I would go all in. I'd push all my chips in on this. I do feel like it's a matter of when, not if. And I think that when it comes, it won't be positioned as like a gimmick or like a little side thing. It will be positioned as like the next entry in the Xbox lineup. They'll call it like the Xbox Series C for cloud or something, and it'll be $99, and it'll be like in the, because really, if you think about it, it is absolutely the next logical step after the Series S, right? A less powerful box that is more affordable and is good enough for most people. Like, we've all come around to the idea of the Series S. When they first announced it, I don't know about anyone else, but I was like, I don't quite understand the point of this, but now I totally get it. It makes so much sense to me now that I've seen it and tried it and used it. And I think that this just feels like the next logical step in that progression.
If you play xCloud on the Xbox app on a PC with the optimal connection, you'll start to believe and think, man, this is the future. You know, I play like Scarlet Nexus on my PC. I don't bother installing it because it runs at 1080p 60 frames a second with no latency whatsoever on my PC. And I do have optimal connection. My laptop's plugged in with Ethernet, and you know, I've got 1 gigabyte down. And I realize that a lot of people, you know, they don't have that, you know, which is fair enough. But I feel like, when I first got broadband, I had 5 megabyte down, and then my company was like, okay, now the cheapest option is 10 megabyte down, and a few years later, now it's 100 megabyte down, and that eventually their minimum baseline, what the broadband companies offer, is constantly going up and up and up, and you don't even need 1 gigabyte to do this. Like where I live in Germany, because I live between 2 addresses, and where I live in Germany, I've only got 100 megabyte down, and it's the same experience running Scarlet Nexus on a PC. I don't know why Scarlet Nexus is like my go-to game for testing xCloud. I don't know why. I think it's because it's got rapid combat or whatever. But great game, by the way. You should play. But yeah, I think but one thing Microsoft's always said is that this isn't supposed to replace the console. And I think a lot of people are nervous about the idea of their ownership going away and they're only renting games through Game Pass and stuff like that. But this is the whole reason why they built the cloud using Xbox hardware. It's so developers could deliver one copy of a game that they could put on a Blu-ray, that they could serve as digital local game, and they could also serve on the cloud. And I think that's that is the advantage that Microsoft has over Google Stadia and Amazon Luna and GeForce Now and all these other services. And ultimately why they're buying Activision Blizzard. Because I know for a fact when they put Diablo 4 on xCloud, which is definitely going to happen at some point, it's going to blow up xCloud in a way that, everyone who's playing Diablo Immortal now thinking like, man, I wish I had a true Diablo experience on my phone. Diablo 4 is going to be that experience, and they'll be able to get it through Game Pass.
When you think about the fact that Xbox's entire marketing philosophy, I can't remember the exact slogan, but it's always like more games in more places or whatever, like play anywhere. Like they really want to kind of make this argument that wherever you go, there's no excuse to not be playing an Xbox game, basically, right? Because they've got so many ways for you to do it. The idea of, let's say, like something with the form factor of an Apple TV, for example, like that portable, right? You literally can just like throw in a bag and take with you. You go to a friend's house, go on vacation, plug it into the hotel TV or whatever with your controller. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. And I really could see them doing both, like the set-top box and the cloud handheld. Jez, I want to ask you. Okay, so you said if $1,000 is your baseline, right? You're going to put $1,000 on the set-top box, the dongle, whatever we want to call it. How much would you put on the cloud handheld?
Maybe a little bit less. I think Microsoft is almost like traumatized about doing small devices after the demise of Windows Phone, And
the Zune. There's a lot of trauma there.
Yeah, there's a lot of trauma with handheld devices, but they're soldiering ahead with the Surface Duo. The little folding Surface phone they made. They're soldiering ahead with that, and I think I hope they get bold and they do it, because I do get this sense that there's some apprehension about entering that space. They'll be compared to the Steam Deck and they'll be compared to Nintendo Switch, and I think as long as they're clear about what they're offering and how much, and that it's much cheaper, because I think the streaming console, I think that'll be $99. And I think handheld, maybe that's $150. And I think that's if they're upfront about what it is and what it represents and where it fits in the ecosystem, I think all the downsides, it's fine to have those kind of downsides in a Gen 1 product, because your enthusiasts will buy it, and the people who understand what it is and what its limitations are and what it can do. And I think Microsoft should be bold and do it. If you're watching, guys, do it.
Please do it. I like that.
and don't forget, because Switch has established this and Steam Deck is now doing it as well. If you got the cloud handheld, why not also dock it or HDMI into your TV as well, right? It would work just as well. So you can have it both ways.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff they could do, I mean, one of the things I heard was because it's codename, the first iteration of this was codename Keystone, and it initially leaked in a reference API thing. It got data mined basically, and it appeared in a list of operating systems. It didn't appear in a list of hardware. So for me, Keystone is probably an operating system designed just for it strips out all the stuff Xbox needs that makes it bloated, and it's sort of like a slimmed down operating system that just runs the cloud and maybe has enough API libraries to run streaming apps like your Netflix and your YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah, kind of like SteamOS.
Yeah, basically. I think that creates a really strong value proposition. You know, even if you're on a plane, for example, and maybe the download speed's not fast enough to play a game, maybe it's good enough to access your Netflix account. Maybe it's good enough to access your Amazon and stuff. Maybe you can even download that stuff natively, and that can be like your big screen entertainment device. You know, yeah, I can't stream my games right now, but I still got access to, you know, this offline content. So I think it just creates a lot of. It's just
I don't
obvious.
know. Airplanes still feel like the fun. You ever try to stream Netflix on any device on an airplane or do anything other than like send a text message? Like we can imagine all kinds of crazy sci-fi shit, but you say to me like, "Oh, stream a movie or play a game over an airplane Wi-Fi connection." That sounds like the most outlandish shit I've ever heard in my life because we are so far from that. Apparently,
I think it'll happen. You know, Elon Musk will get his Starlink satellites onto every plane at some point. You know, it will.
If
Please
Elon
no.
is the answer, we're all fucked.
Please no.
Yeah.
Well, boys, it is Friday.
You're not a Starlink stan? You know, like where I live in Germany, it's crazy because like they launch
we
the
try to hit him
satellites
up
near
just
from
to
where I live.
send one for Mike up in the mountains where
Yeah,
he
we
gets,
try
like,
to get one. I need one.
where he gets like one
one.
down. You know, like it's rough for him out there.
Oh no!
Oh my god.
Okay, well,
Jez has brought the energy for the Xbox handheld, and Gary, I will now turn to you and say, from now on, I'm going to give you a whole lot of love for the Xbox handheld because I'm on board because of both of you bringing the energy and the fun.
Back and find that clip of you in Paris laughing at me like, get out of here.
We laughed at you. We did laugh at you.
Go back and find it.
Now you got Jez on your team, you two together. I'm all on board. And of course, I've been all on board for this awesome podcast because I got to bring on one of my best friends, somebody that I really admire and love listening to and reading and just learning from and being a part of in this awesome Xbox community. And that's Jez Corden from Windows Central Gaming. And of course, the Xbox 2 podcast. We've had on the co-host Randall Thor 19, the man with the million. But Jez, today was the day all about you. I was so happy to make this happen, especially here in the summer months. But thank you for giving me your late night Friday. Before we go, of course, let's promote it out. Where can everybody find you? What awesome stuff are you doing?
Yeah, so you can find my article content on windowscentral.com/gaming, although I don't know if that link still works, but yeah, let's just pretend it does. And that's where I generally post, editorials and stuff like that, although there's going to be a lot of headphone content over the coming week, because there's not a whole lot of news to talk about at the minute. But also I'm on Twitter at Jez Corden, JZCorden, like James Corden, that guy. And also, Xbox 2 podcast on Randall Thor's YouTube channel, also on Spotify and all that stuff. Xbox 2 spelled out DWO. And thank you so much for having me. And I'm sorry again that I was a bit late.
Don't worry about it. It was a blast with you too, and I know we'll bring you back, and you and Gary Whitta can talk for hours about what Xbox needs to do because you guys are the best. Gary.
No, I mean, it's good. I'm glad that Paris is kind of ducking out on us to avoid getting roasted for his bad food takes all week. This has worked out great.
No, I'm going to stand with Paris, Lily. In-N-Out is very mid. Very mid.
And White Castle?
What do you say? That was bad too? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. White Castle is nasty. White Castle is nasty as hell. Oh, yeah.
You know what? When Paris is back, Gary, we will have a food conversation to make sure we all set the record straight on where we stand.
I make a point of pride of staying out of like food takes because I think, like what you like. And if someone wants pineapple on pizza or whatever, mind your own business. It's their pizza. They can have what they like on it. But Paris, man, at some point, you got to step in. There has to be an intervention.
All right, my two gaming dads will step in and we'll have an intervention. That will be on another episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Go check out my guy, Jez, anytime, and go follow him on Twitter because it's a great follow. We'll see you all back here next week. Goodbye, everyone.